Hello, guys. Welcome back to the Uncensored Critic podcast. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. I really appreciate your time. It means the world to me, so thank you very much. Today, we welcome along a brilliant actress by the name of Lucy Eaton. Some of you will know her from Staged, the lockdown drama that hit BBC One over the course of the third wave of lockdown over here in the UK, which thankfully is behind us now. But nevertheless, it gave us some good memories from that. Let's take a moment to introduce Lucy. Lucy trained at LAMDA following a degree from the University of Cambridge. Alongside acting, she has her own theatre company, Go People, a company that produces work that specialises in intimate drama. Previous productions from that company include Almost, Maine, and the seven-actor cast of Shakespeare's A Midsummer Nights Dream. She is also the runner of her own podcast, Hear Me Out, where she talks to actors and creatives in the business about some of their work and their favourite speeches from plays, both young and old. Lucy herself has worked across stage and screen on shows such as Almost Maine and Daisy Pulls It Off at the Park Theatre, The Provoked Wife, also with Go People, Midsummer Night's Dream at the Southwark Playhouse, directed by her brother, Simon Evans, who's also the writer of Staged. The Resistible Rise of Arturo by Brecht, I probably said that wrong, at the Donmar warehouse, Bell, Book and Candle with the company Theatre in the Clouds, the day in the life of Joe Egg at the Trafalgar Studios, for which she gave a lethally accurate portrayal, quote The Guardian. And for TV, Murder Maps for Netflix, and of course Stage, seasons 1, 2 and 3, as Lucy with certain David Tennant and Michael Sheen, which, according to The Independent, completely nails the quirks of life in lockdown, which it surely did. But without further ado, hello, Lucy. Yes, you all right?
I am very well, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
No, thank you for coming. It means a lot to me. Thank you. So we start at the beginning with every guest. Where did it come from? The love of acting.
Oh, um, oh my God. Okay, oh, I just liked being at the center of attention. Is the truthful answer there. I was never a shy child. I definitely was always like quite into the school plays when I was a kid, but no more than I think anyone. Like it was a fun thing to do. And then I remember when I was 13, I was in the oldest year of the school I was in, and I managed to get the lead role in My Fair Lady. I managed to get the role of Eliza Doolittle. And I think up until that point, I had not been like the theatre kid in the school. I was just like one of the kids who liked doing plays. And I loved it so much. I had such a good time. And I just loved it was everything. It was like I loved the rehearsing. I loved the dressing up. I loved the costumes, and I loved being the center of attention. Like I really liked there was a moment at the end of I Could Have Danced All Night when I remember I mean again picture me, I'm 12 or 13 years old, very small, and I remember like hitting that note and striding off stage as the lights went down, and I just felt like the coolest person who had ever lived. I was like, this is the dream, this is so great. So and then I changed schools, and I think, you know changes of location or changes of school in your life, like they're these big moments where you can sort of like re-identify, like redefine yourself. And I think because that sort of happened right at the end of a school, and then I moved, I remember going into the new school and I didn't have any friends there, and I was almost like, I can be whatever I want to be, and I'm going to be the drama girl, I'm going to be the actor.
Mm.
And so then, yeah, I just sort of kept pursuing it, and I loved it. And actually, I started producing. If I think about it, like that first year in that new school, I put on a play with some friends. So I think I sort of started falling in love with the producing as well, like really, really, really early on.
Mm.
And I wasn't necessarily going to be an actor or a producer. I knew it was a dream, but it was one of those things that, throughout the rest of my sort of school time, I was definitely pursuing like academic things as well. And I
Mm.
think I always had it in the back of my mind that I probably wanted to go for it and give it a go. But I was also sort of arming and ahhing over, I don't know, all sorts of other careers. But I knew that I loved acting, but it was just sort of, I think I was being realistic about the chances of it going well. Um, But yeah, there you go. That's quite a long-winded answer. I went off on a million tangents there.
No,
That's where it came from.
keep,
Attention. I liked attention.
no, keep the tangents coming. It was good. No, it's like you said that your head's like, oh, what about longevity? But your heart's going, no, 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 no. Keep going, keep going, keep going.
Yeah,
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 I shared the same thing. Yeah, just keep going with it, man. Keep the acting bug alive. So
yeah.
I mentioned that you went to Cambridge of all
Mm.
places. What took you to Cambridge?
So my parents, my brilliant, lovely parents, who are absolutely gorgeous people, they were also quite pushy parents in a
Nice.
good way, but like I think they were, my mum certainly was, is a Liverpudlian, and her sister became like doctors and dentists. I think they were the first, they were really pushed to be like very academic, and they did really well.
Yeah,
And I think, yeah, it was just one of those things that, again, as a kid, like doing well academically was drilled into me as a important thing. Um, and my brother, who you've already mentioned, who I'm incredibly close to, he got into Cambridge, and went to Cambridge, and he is 4.5 years older than me. And so for the majority of my early life, I looked at what he did and wanted to mimic it. To be fair, like a lot of things, I would look at what he did and I just thought he was the coolest person in the world. So anything he did, I was like, yeah, I want to do that. Um, so I think as soon as he got in, I had that dream. And actually, to be fair, it stopped being about, it's obviously such an academically prestigious university, and that should have been maybe the main reason for wanting to go there. But actually, it has the most incredible drama scene.
yes,
Um, and I think, I don't want to make enemies with people who are at Oxford University here, but I think even more than Oxford University, like I think the drama scene at Cambridge is sort of mad
yeah,
in its size and its diversity, and like the number of spaces and the number of things being put on, and all of this sort of stuff. So when my brother went, I sort of watched him doing all of that. It really was the drama side of it that I was incredibly envious of. I was watching him living this like brilliant time where he was just making things and being in things and directing things like all the time. And I absolutely fell in love with that idea. So for me, oh, did I go there? It says my connection
no,
is
it's all good.
unstable.
No, it's
Oh,
all
all
good.
right.
Yeah, you're all good.
So for me, I think that became the real driving force. And actually, if I hadn't got in at the point that I got in, I was going to try and take a gap year and work for a year
Mhm.
and try again. I don't know that I'd have tried more than twice. I think if I hadn't got into Cambridge the second time, I'd have gone somewhere else.
Yeah,
But certainly I was going to put things off and just work for a year to try and get in, because I thought the drama scene was so, I just craved it so much. And it was amazing. I mean, it lived up to it in all ways. Like
yeah,
my 3 years there were three of the best years of my life, like without question.
yeah,
And the drama there, I mean, I almost feel like I trained more there than at LAMDA, which is obviously in some ways totally untrue. Like LAMDA was so much more brilliant for the techniques, and I guess your vocal stuff and your physical stuff and all of that.
mm,
um but in terms of just pure amount of, you learn through doing, and we've all seen actors who as young actors aren't great, and then as they go through their career and they do more and more, they become outstanding,
mm,
because a lot of the time, not always, but a lot of the time you improve through doing. And
yeah,
I think my time at university was really special because I just was acting all the time and different stuff all the time. And there was one term in my final year, um, when the terms at Cambridge are 8 weeks long. And for 5 of those 8 weeks, I was doing a play. So
wow,
5 different plays. So I remember I'd done a tour maybe over the summer. And so when I came back for the new term, the first week back, we were doing that play. And then essentially moving on from there, 5 of those weeks, I was performing every night, and they were all different. Yeah, it was like there'll have been comedy stuff and Shakespeare stuff and modern things. And so just the training of like, I mean, my degree just like went out the window. It was like I was just all about the drama.
yeah,
So yes, I feel incredibly lucky. I had a wonderful time.
yeah. Because it's the Footlights they came, which is
Mm,
yeah,
yes.
who've produced graduates like Emma Thompson, Hugh Laurie,
Mm.
Stephen Fry. I mean, it's insane. You know, Ben Elton, I think, was another one as well.
Oh, I mean, apps, and that's another interesting thing is a lot of the time when you're at Cambridge, people will say you might be doing a load of acting, and footlights is the thing that everyone's heard of. So a lot of the time you'd get like, you'd meet adults, they'd be like, "Oh, are you in the footlights?" And actually, a lot of people weren't in the footlights. Like the footlights is a very specifically comedy,
Mm,
so you could be like doing the most amazing stuff at Cambridge and like never set foot in an audition room for a footlights show because it's so specifically comedy. Um, but I did end up doing a load of footlights and I was on the committee for the footlights in the last year. And that was wonderful as well, in a way that I now look back on with huge fondness, but kind of like it's a different person. Like I still, in my acting, I would still say I think comedy is my strong point, but I would never, oh my God, the idea of actually being a comedian is
mm,
terrifying to me. The
no.
idea that there was a version of me 15 years ago that did stand up once a fortnight, which is what I did back then, is I sort of look back on this like younger version of me with great pride because I'm like, wow, that is not a thing I could do now. So I'm so pleased I got to sort of see that as well. But it's so funny because yeah, the committee is usually like 6 or 7 people big and 6 or 7 people large. And the other people who were on the committee with me, they are all brilliant comedians now, and they're like writing for the BBC or like getting the Fringe First Awards, they're amazing stand-up comedians. And I sort of can't believe they let me run the ship with them, sail the ship with them for a bit because I'm so inferior to them. So I feel very, very lucky to have been able to like just exist in their funny orbs for a bit.
Yeah, no, I share the same thing. I couldn't do stand up because the thought of it is, ugh, it
I
just,
just also feel a bit like I don't even know where to begin. I'm like, how did I? And of course, it's like acting. All these things get better if you practice. Like, and that's why I will have been doing it back then because I would have been doing it often, and so I'd have been getting better. But now I sort of go, where do you even begin? But I think comedians are forever walking through life, noticing things that are funny. To, I guess it's like this is a really weird tangent. I always think I have a generally pretty positive outlook on life,
mhm,
and I realize that one of the techniques that like therapists will often give someone to try and make them more positive is the idea of a gratitude journal or the idea of trying to
mm.
list things you're grateful for because
My
there
journey,
is
yeah, yeah,
yeah, and there is a real almost science behind that you're training your brain to look for the positive, and
yeah.
that can have a real impact. And actually that is a thing that I've sort of always done. And I have a little type journal thing where every day I put down a thing to be grateful for. And it is so true that like I now walk through life, I might be out and about and the wind blows and it smells nice, like smells like jasmine or something. And I'll be like, oh, that was nice. Maybe I'll put it in my journal later. It's like you do start noticing things. And I'm sure that's what it is with comedians. When you're so used to making stuff, you must just walk through the world forever being like, that's funny. That's funny. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, that I can make that funny. It's like, but to me now, I wouldn't even know where to start if someone said, like, try to get up on stage and be funny for 5 minutes. I'd be
Yeah.
like, no, thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if you've ever been to the Comedy Store in London or anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a guy. If anyone doesn't know, like this sort of the guy who holds it together is called a compere, and
Mm,
this guy came out and he just literally already had probably about 25 minutes stage time, 5 minutes at the beginning, and then between
mm.
all the acts. But his quickness, someone would just say something in the audience, and he would latch onto it, and he would just deliver this one liner, and the whole place is shaking. And I'm
Yeah.
like,
You know who is really good at that? Ed Gamble, who is obviously now huge name, huge
"Mm,
star. Like his own podcast is like, I think one of the biggest British podcasts around. But he was at Durham in the comedy scene, I think a
mm,
couple of years older than me when I was doing footlight stuff. And so I came across Ed loads. And I remember even back then as a student, he was known as one of these guys that like he would do the whole he'd go be doing his bit of stand up and he would always start chatting to the audience first and
mm,
whatever they said he'd have such a good comeback, he'd have such a he'd just ask them what their names were and he would always have something so funny to say. I used to be like, what a skill. Like he is one of those guys where you're like, you deserve every success you're having
yeah,
because
yeah."
I saw it in the early days. You are so skilled. Like he is a really funny guy.
Mm. Yeah, there's some people out. I think his name's Mark Hughes. I could be getting that.
Mm.
Yeah, or was that the Football Manager? I can't think.
Oh, I wouldn't know.
I don't know. I can't remember his name. I have to look him up. But he told this story that, like you say, listening to the audience, he said he was waiting in the wings backstage before his first one, and there was a couple on the front row. They weren't really sure if they wanted to be there that night, and
Mm-mm.
the guy turned to his missus and just said, "Look, if it's not look, if it's not our thing, we'll just go to Nando's afterwards." And he heard that and thought, oh, "Okay." And he walked out, and his first line was, "Oh, I'm really glad you're all here. You could be somewhere else other than Nando's or something like that." And he picks on the audience, and I thought, "That's brilliant."
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
obviously I might
So
not
good.
deliver it very well because I'm not a comedian, but but the way that he picks it up and the way people do it, it's just
But that's interesting what you just said there as well, because yeah, delivery is another thing, right? When there's comedians that you get really into, what you start realizing is they could say anything and they
mm,
say it in their tone of voice or they say it with that look in their eye and
and
you're
it's
going to be in
funny.
hysterics. And for me, I mean, for a lot of people back in the day, that was Ricky Gervais. Like,
Mm.
as in, it was just his manner became something we all found so funny. I think for me now, have you seen much John Mulaney?
No, I
He's
haven't.
American.
Yeah,
He he has a famous, anyone listening to this must YouTube John
okay.
Mulaney,
Write this down.
horse loose in a hospital. Okay. Which is
Horse
essentially
loose in
horse
hospital.
loose in a hospital, which is
Yeah.
essentially his little metaphor of when Trump became president.
Okay.
And he's essentially saying it's a bit like a horse being loose in a hospital. And it is so funny. But there is loads of him on Netflix. And he is someone who now for me, like he could almost say anything and I'm kind of in hysterics. He's just done it was almost like a Netflix experiment. They did a live talk show on Netflix, but it was live. Like it was going out at the same time, and it's like I had to explain to everyone what live meant there. It's like the audience know what live means. And it was very weird and it was sort of about LA and it was so kooky and strange, but people still seemed to love it. I think because he is so
It gets.
likable and so
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah.
Anyway, watch any of his shows, but firstly, YouTube Horse Loose
Yeah.
in Hospital.
Yeah, it's like you say, just like some people could literally just say the words, okay, you go down the road and you turn left.
Mm,
And like if
mm,
I say it, you go down the road and you turn left and you're like, okay.
fine.
But
Yeah,
some people they can just say, go down the road and then turn left. And you're going,
in
how am I
hysterics.
laughing? What's
Yeah,
going on?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Oh, it
yeah.
really is a skill. But we could talk about that for ages. That's great. But anyway, let's go. So you've done Cambridge. What did you study, by the way?
I did English and drama with education studies, which was a relatively new course at the time. It was the only course at Cambridge that involved the word drama. In hindsight, I would not do it again. If I had my time again, I would probably do just English.
Mm.
Um, but I also might not have got in if I just did English because English is one of the most competitive courses at Cambridge.
Yeah.
Um, so in a way, no regrets. But it was fine.
Mm.
It was fine.
Yeah.
That would be my.
What were some of the downsides to it, if you don't mind me asking?
It was okay. So there's like a lot, obviously, in all parts of life, there are snobs, which is a shame. Um,
Yeah.
Even within Cambridge, there
No,
are
really?
snobs.
Even in Cambridge?
No
Wow.
surprise.
Wow. How am I not
um,
surprised?
exactly. And I think there was a real sense that it was a lesser degree. It was quite new.
Oh,
And
okay.
it was looked down upon. There were a handful of courses at Cambridge that you realize when you're there that a lot of other people at Cambridge are like, oh, you do that. Mm. Which over time, however much it's stupid, it can really get you down when you're there and you're slogging away.
Oh, yeah.
I would say on top of that, it was easier. It definitely, like when I looked at my friends, so for instance, English, when I say, oh, if I had my time again, what they were learning about to me um, was slightly more interesting and more in depth, but it was also grueling in a way that, in fact, you know, very long story, very short. I actually tried to change in the middle of my time there because, if I'm being honest, I was letting the sort of snobbery get me down. And I
Mm.
shouldn't have really been caring. But I tried to change and I got the permission to change after a lot of hard work and then decided not to change because I suddenly realized that actually doing a course, basically, I mean, I'm here now telling the big wide world, but I was like, in the big wide world, no one cares.
Mm.
And why am I going to jump into something that is going to be incredibly grueling for my last year or so at Cambridge, meaning I can't do the stuff I really want to do, which is like doing all these plays, rather than staying in something where I've got the lay of the land now, I know what's expected of me. I mean, like straight English at Cambridge, there's one paper in your final year called the tragedy paper, and they expect you to have a sort of A-level, more than A-level, but more than A-level A-stars worth of knowledge of every single tragedy ever written.
Right.
So like every Shakespeare tragedy, every Jacobean tragedy, every Greek tragedy, every,
Yeah.
And that's one paper. And you're meant to know. It's like, it is insane, the amount that they expect you to know. And of course, there may be many people listening being like, why bother? What's the point of that? Which would be a fair comment. But whether there's a point to it or not, it's a lot. It's a lot to deal with. So I think, yes, ultimately I decided not to. But yeah, I just didn't have a huge love for the course. There were parts of it I really enjoyed, of course. Like there were parts of it and certain lecturers and teachers who I really loved and things. But I would just say it was not the highlight of my time.
Oh, well, you made it through and you're here now.
I made it through. It was hard. No, it was lovely.
Yeah, good. Now you can say you went to Cambridge, which not a lot of people can say. Just, I went to Cambridge, darling. Yeah, I did. And then you went to LAMDA, which has produced a lot of amazing talent over the years. What was drama school like for you?
Drama school was the grueling bit. I would say drama school was very hard. And I actually saw someone recently, a girl from my year who I'm still friends with, and she made a comment about me not having a very good time there. And I was almost quite surprised. I was like, how do you know that I didn't have a good time there? And she was like, it was incredibly obvious. You said it all the time. And I was like, oh God, okay. I'm so sorry. Yeah, I think I've mentioned it briefly, maybe even on my own show. But one thing that I think didn't help was personal stuff going alongside it, which was just that my long-term boyfriend from university and I both got into LAMDA together, which is mad. Yeah. In a year of 27, both of us got into LAMDA and nowhere else. So we obviously both took the places, and then subsequently broke up after a term. So we broke up very amicably, and I absolutely love the guy. I think he's amazing, and he is now a very brilliant comedian himself. So it was a very, it wasn't that it was an unpleasant breakup, but it was just that I think, as with all things in life, if you're going through like a weird personal thing, or like you're in a place where like your personal life is jarring or changing or shifting, and then you have to be in the same room doing like awkward, weird exercises with your ex-boyfriend all the time. And I think that was maybe one element that didn't like set me up for enjoyment.
Could have been more helpful, yeah.
But and so I bring that up only to say I do think that was quite a large part of it. I think that was quite a large part of why I was just then not in the right mind frame to be loving it. But also it's really, really, really hard. Like drama school, I'm sure a lot of your listeners have been, or or want to go, or have read up about it, or whatever. But it's like, it is really intense, and a lot is asked of you. And I would say LAMDA actually is one of the people I've spoken to, it's one of the best in terms of it does not seem to have an aim of like breaking you down. The cliche you hear about with a lot of drama schools of breaking you down to build you up. And I'm sure all drama schools say they don't do that, but we all know that a lot of them that does seem to be the method. LAMDA does not do that. LAMDA definitely had more of a sense of being like, this is an ensemble place. We want to find what's great about you and just like bring you out of your shell even more. So I have a huge amount of respect and love for the school, but there's no getting away from the fact that it's just, I was doing the 2-year course as well, which was meant to be sort of for postgrads, and the idea was meant to be that it was the 3-year course in 2 years. So we would have 2 days of the week you'd be in at 9 in the morning and leave at 9 at night. Most days you were in at 10 in the morning, left at 9 at night. I think there was one day you finished at 5 or 6. And, so it was just like, it was like running a marathon, it was really relentless. And I just remember the emotions were high, like all the time. And you were tired all the time, and your body ached all the time, because you have lessons where the first 10 minutes is just like skipping jump rope for 10 minutes. And then I remember I got really into stage fighting, stage combat when I was at LAMDA. And you practiced so hard when you were doing the stage. We had a thing called Fight Night, which was like a bit like a gladiator arena. Like you basically staged fight. You didn't have to do it, but if you were into the stage combat stuff, you'd have a fight choreographed by one of the teachers and you practice it, and then there'd be fight night and the whole school would go and watch, and I think other schools have a similar version. And I remember prepping for fight night once, and I was doing a saber fight with this actress who again is another brilliant comedian now, called Jo Griffin. And we were doing this saber fight, and we'd just practiced so hard, like every day in those lunch breaks, in those brief moments when you don't finish school at 9 at night, we'd be there till 9 at night practicing the saber fight. And I'd sprained some muscle in my groin and everything hurt. And I remember there was a moment in the fight where I was stood on a dining room table, and Jo sort of swiped her saber as if to like cut off my legs, and I had to jump. And I remember doing this, practicing, and we got to this bit, and I jumped up on the table, and she went to swipe, and I had this like, everything went into slow motion. I had this sort of out of body experience moment of like, I can't jump. Like there's nothing left in me. Like I can't jump. And I just stood there as like in my mind in slow motion, Jo with like all the weight in the world, because she thinks I'm not going to be there, spins round and essentially canes my legs with a metal cane.
Ooh, okay.
And because I just didn't get out of the way. But I remember just knowing it wasn't going to happen. I was like, I can't jump. And boy, did my legs bleed. But it was just like,
they didn't.
yeah. But that was just, I always think of that moment for being like, I was so tired all the time.
Yeah, no,
So tired.
the fatigue is real. Even when you have the one of those experiences.
How did you find? Well, of course, you had the weird experience because of COVID.
Well, I was very lucky actually because we were talking before we came on that I did get in when it was all Zoom and stuff, and then I deferred, so then we went back, and it was like in the room. We had no trouble at all. So I actually got, because I did the master, it was only 1 year course.
Right.
So yeah, it was great. It was literally like 3 years just kind of plunged all into 1 year. So you were on the ball, bang, 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 all the time.
Yeah.
So I got a year in the room doing real training rather than Zoom, which was
Good.
which was
I do
really
also think, of course, everything is about expectation. And it's my mother's favorite phrase, everything's about expectations. And she's so right. Jan, you're right. But I had such a good time at university. In a way, LAMDA was never going to be able to compare. I was coming from my like heaven, and there was sort of it could only go down from there because I'd had such a good time. And on top of that, I think I really thought, to say about expectations, that it was going to beat that. I thought it was going to be the best time of my life at drama school. And the day I got into LAMDA was like one of the happiest days of my life. And again, I think I just had, my expectations were so high. And then I got there and I was like, oh, this is just really hard. So, but it was still, I have so much to be grateful for. And I don't really have a bad word to say about LAMDA itself. Like, what an amazing school. But yeah, just a tough couple of years.
Yeah. What would you say was the difference between Lucy on day one and Lucy on the last day of drama school?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think in terms of, as an actor, I was just much more disciplined. Like Lucy on day one, I remember in my recall, they said they have a panel of like 15 people, and they were like, what do you think you need to work on? Like, why do you need to come to drama school? And I remember going, I think I maybe don't use my voice very well. Like, and the whole panel of 15 people were like, like clearly. So I would say I had a much stronger voice by the end. I was just much more disciplined by the end. I think this sounds really, what I'm about to say is the honest answer, but it sounds really gloomy, but like,
Go for it.
I was more jaded. Like I think Lucy on day one was, I think again, and in a way that's a great training for like this industry, because you've got to be realistic about stuff. But I think I was a less positive person by the end of my time at drama school.
Okay.
Like I'd found the 2 years very difficult, and I think I was a less like, I was about to say, I think I believed in myself less. which sounds bad,
Okay.
but true. I think I was a bit, yeah, I was more jaded by it. I'd lost my shine a little
Okay.
bit, but I think I've got some of the shine back.
Oh, of course.
And I
Yeah.
also don't think it's LAMDA's fault. Do you know what I mean? It's more like, I wouldn't say like LAMDA broke me down. It absolutely didn't. It's a
No, of
brilliant school.
course. Yeah.
But yes, I think I'd lost a bit of my shine, but I was technically a more disciplined and better actor.
Okay. Discipline with the cost of shine. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But
Yeah.
then you get the shine back, and then maybe I've still got
Yeah.
the discipline.
Yeah. I mean,
So
you've got it back now, right? Well, I can tell you
I
that.
would say,
Yeah.
yes, I would say uh the what you mentioned at the beginning, my theatre company, that has been transformative in my
Yeah.
life, having my own company. And is like one of the greatest, like proudest things of my life so far. So yes, that's been a big one and bringing the shine back.
Yeah. I think that's a good lead on. Let's jump into Go People, your theatre company.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I suppose that's a good lead on in a way because you say you've left LAMDA, you sort of wanted to get
Mm,
your shine back, and then
mm,
you founded this company.
mm.
Do you think in founding it that was part of getting your shine back, wanting to work with other people?
Yes, but I can't take any credit for it. All credit must go to Melanie Fulbrook, who is my brilliant business partner,
Okay.
and Freddie Hutchins, my other brilliant business partner. But Mel, I came out of LAMDA, and as a lot of people do, I think they leave drama school and they're like, I'm here, even though I say all that stuff about I'd lost my shine and I had less confidence, like I still ultimately obviously thought like I'm going to be an actor, and like
Yeah.
I've got this amazing training behind me now. And I remember saying to my parents, like, I can't possibly go on a family holiday because all the auditions are going to be coming in. It was like, so I came out with some hope, definitely, maybe just not as much hope as I'd had at the beginning, but I
Of
came out
course.
with some hope. And that was immediately quashed by the realities of the industry. And I had a very dry, looking back now, really rather good, but at the time it felt very dry. First sort of couple of years out.
Yeah.
I think I did, like, I stepped in to do a part of the Finborough for someone, like almost like an understudy, but an understudy they didn't plan to have. So I stepped in and did a play at the Finborough for about a week, and I was a non-speaking part in Jamie Lloyd's production of Duchess of Malfi at the Old Vic.
Mhm.
But that was it. And over the course of a year and a half, you're like, those
Yeah.
are lovely jobs, but like that is not much stuff. And there was a lot of sitting around twiddling my thumbs and doing private tutoring on the side, which has always been my side hustle income. And I was, after about a year and a half, like really low. I would say that was the lowest point. I was very feeling very disenchanted with everything and very low confidence, and really bleak about my decision to try and be an actor. And in amongst all of that, I went to a hen do of a dear friend, and Mel was at this hen do. Mel had also been at university with me, so we knew each other, and we knew each other very well and got on really, really well, but weren't super close friends or anything.
Yeah.
And Mel approached me at this hen do, and she had just graduated from Guildhall 3 months before or something. And bless her, knowing Mel now, this is classic Mel, she was already fed up. She was like, nah, I'd put up with it for 2 years or something, and Mel had done it for 3 months and was like, can't be doing with this. This is really annoying. She was like, I can't be sitting by the phone waiting for it to ring. So she was like, I want to start my own theatre company, and, how do you feel about doing it with me? And the honest thing she said was, I don't really want to do it with one of my best friends, because I think starting a company with someone can be difficult and you don't know how it goes, but I want to do it with someone who I respect. And I don't think she'd thought it through before. I don't think she was like, I'm going to ask Lucy. I think we were just chatting at a hen do, and she was like, come to think of it, you're perfect. Do you want to do it? And honestly, at the time, I felt a bit like, because I was in my quite gloomy phase, I think I even thought that idea was a bit crap. I was like, what will come from it? Everyone, I remember in my head thinking, everyone's got a theatre company, as in like everyone says they have a company and they don't do anything with it.
Everyone has a podcast, which is not true, by the way.
No, it is not true. But yeah, so I remember thinking, in a way that the idea, I didn't have high hopes for the idea, but I also was in a place where I thought, who the hell am I to say no to anyone or anything right now? Like, this is an opportunity that has been, ooh, sorry, my computer's making lots of noises. This is an opportunity that has been absolutely fallen into my lap with a person who I respect and think is lovely. And who am I to say no? So I was like, yeah, sure. And in my mind, I thought, let's see what happens.
Mm.
And what happened was, that was a decade ago, over a decade ago now, and it like totally changed our lives. So the only reason I say all that is to be like, I didn't go looking for something to bring my shine back and work with people. I was actually drowning a bit. And my brother, who has always been my sort of biggest inspiration and the person I go to for advice, he'd been saying for a good year, like, why don't you make something yourself? And why don't you? And I remember at the time being like, I don't want to make something for myself. I spoke actually to a friend more recently, maybe about 5 years ago, who was about to write something. And I remember her expressing the fact that she was almost ashamed that she was writing something for herself because she felt that it was almost like an admission of failure, that you were having to make your own work because no one else wanted to put you in theirs. And I think that's how I felt maybe at the beginning of Go People, was like, even when my brother was saying, make something yourself, I was like, I don't want to make something myself. I want someone to think I'm the right person for the job and to give me the job. Like that's, I want to be wanted, more than I want to just act for the sake of acting. I want to get the job, and so I think, I was struggling to make that leap myself. So if it weren't for someone like Mel going, well, I'm doing this thing, do you want to hold my hand and come along for the ride? I sort of really needed someone to like pull me up by the socks and be like, come on, pull up your socks, not pull me up by the socks. And say, come on, do this with me. And then immediately, like I would say within a couple of months, I was like, this is the best thing I could have ever done, because it was just for all the reasons that everyone says, just having a bit more control, feeling like you're in control, being more creatively inspired because you're planning stuff and you're doing things. And then the community that we've ended up building, we very soon after that, we brought on Freddie Hutchins, our third business partner, who is a very good friend of mine. And the three of us have been just a really great team ever since. And the community of actors and directors that we've made in doing the Go People stuff and Rebels in Hand, which is this sort of other part of the company, it's just a group of people that I so admire and I so love spending time with, and I feel immensely proud of what we've made and so lucky that I get to hang out with them. So it has also ended up being like a community. It's ended up being a thing, and acting can be such an isolating and lonely industry. So I think that's been amazing as well. I mean, we had a big party to celebrate our 10-year decade of the company earlier this year, and it felt like a wedding, honestly. Like we were all in tears, and the actors and the people who were there, like it was incredibly emotional, and there were speeches, like it was literally like a wedding. But I just feel so lucky to get to hang out with and act and create with those people, and to think that I used to not want that is mad. I used to want to be put in other people's things, and now I'm like, oh my God, but then I would never have, had I had that. I'm trying to think of an example, the Tom Bateman version of events or the Emilia Clarke version of events, where you come out of drama school and you land something straight away. I'm like, this wouldn't have happened, so I feel very lucky now.
Yeah, and it's like one thing you mentioned there, I was thinking about you've just got to keep I've been out of drama school now for like 2 years. It's just about keeping the bug alive, because you can very easily lose it. You can very easily, and thankfully I haven't had that experience, nor will I. But it's about just, you've got to find something to keep you going, because if you literally, like your friend probably thought, sitting waiting by the phone to ring for 3 months, she thought, do I want a lifetime of this? No. And I think, and then even actors who are still working now, like yourself and I, we don't want that experience. We don't want to sit and wait by the phone. We want to keep busy, keep it all alive and stuff, which is great. And like yourself, you got the theatre company, you got your podcast, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But yeah, it's just about keeping things alive, keep going. Even if it's just the smallest things, like watch your favorite film again, or go to the theatre if you can, get a discounted ticket. There are always ways to keep this thing alive. And when And then you look back on times where you think, why would I possibly think about giving up when it was all just coming together and working there? Anyway,
Yeah. I
hopefully not.
would say though, to add to that,
Yeah.
I would also say it is okay if you find something else you want to do. Like that's the other thing I found. A lot of
Yeah.
the time, people, I remember when I was younger, people would be like, "Oh, how long are you going to try for?" And I was like, "I'm going to try until something else is more appealing."
Yeah.
And I think that's what it is. And I've seen various friends, stop acting or stop directing, more maybe since COVID.
Mm.
And often it comes from a place of someone going, this is not fun anymore.
Yeah.
And it's okay. Like if it is not fun anymore for you and you've decided that actually there's a director friend of mine, Tom Attenborough, and I say director friend, he's now a teacher and he's been a teacher for like 6 or 7 years now. And he is an exceptional teacher and it brings him so much joy.
Yeah.
And he loves the stability of it. And he's clearly brilliant at it. And he loves doing a job where like he's good at it and he's rewarded for being good at it because he can see the impact he's having on his students every day. And I'm like, it is okay to decide there's something else. There is no shame in being like, actually, I don't want to be an actor anymore.
Mm.
Whereas I think people always see stepping away from acting as like, oh, have I failed? And it's like, no,
No,
you haven't
not at all.
failed. Like you've just decided something else serves you better now. Like
Yeah.
I have a friend who's actually just stopped again directing to do a law conversion degree, and she speaks brilliantly about it. I remember the first time she told me that she was going to stop directing, I was sort of very supportive. I did say at some point the words, oh, well, I am sorry. And she was like, you don't need to be sorry. She was like, I've been a great director and I've had a really successful career, but like, it's not working for me anymore. Like, I have a child. I've worked a lot in the last year, but even working as much as I did, my salary is pathetic. And that doesn't serve me anymore. Like, there's no fun in that. Like, I quite want to be paid. I want to be paid really well. I want to do a job where, and it's like, great, and she had a real sense of like, no one needs to be sorry for me. I was great. Now I'm doing something different.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I want to take, I wish more people had that sense. It is not a failing to step away if that is the thing
Yeah.
that feels right now.
Yeah. Or even just to take a break, if,
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. I'm saying I'm not giving up. I'm just not gonna, I'm just not gonna do
And
anything.
I did that, I would say, just before Go People started. It
Yeah.
was just for a summer, but for a summer, I had gone, I am going to mentally take a break. I was like, I'm not going to tell my agent I'm not around or anything, but I was like, I am going to mentally switch off from it. I'm going to go away and I'm going to I took an amazing tutoring job that took me to the Hamptons, and I'm going to like go and do these. I just remember being like, I'm just going to try and enjoy life and not be an actor for the summer. I'm not going to think about it. I'm not going to try, and see what happens. And of course, what happened at the end of that was Mel coming with this opportunity for the company, which sort of turned my life around. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Sometimes also it's okay to go, let me just not pursue this for a bit. Let's take a break, because it is a relentless job where you have
Yeah.
to pursue all the time, um, which is so draining. So it's also okay, like you say, yeah, to just
Yeah.
go, oh, let me just step back for a moment.
Just step back for a bit. Yeah. No, there's a famous story that flies around on social media a lot of Harrison Ford, who
Mm.
who became an actor, and then he realized sort of everyone was like in the same boat. Everyone was one thing he noticed was everyone was rushing. Everyone was like bang, 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 trying to like CV here, CV there, phone call
Yeah.
there, phone call there, trying to get it all done. And he was looking around thinking he got a few bits and pieces, but then he sort of thought, I don't like the jobs I'm doing. So he became a carpenter and then did a
Oh, right, yeah.
carpentry for a few years. And then he thought, right, well, let's try acting again. Let's see what happens. And he went back and he realized that all those people who were in this rat race and just running at it, they were almost like burnt out, not interested, or just given up completely because they thought, no, I'm not getting the roles I want. I'm not getting where I want to be. And I think they thought that in order to be successful, you must therefore run at it and it will happen right
Yeah.
away,
Yeah.
which for some people it works. Like you say, Amelia Clark or Orlando Bloom, whose
Mm-mm-mm-mm.
first
Yeah.
job first job out of drama school was freaking Legolas, you
Yeah.
greedy bastard. Um,
Yeah.
you bastard. I love you, Orlando, by the way, I'm joking. But sometimes it just doesn't happen that quickly. You have to take your time. And he came back with kind of a fresh mind and thought, hey, I'm going to read this part. If it's not mine, but I'll read it. And if they like it, great. If they don't, they don't. And
Yeah.
it's fair to say he's done reasonably okay since then. So
He's all right. No one needs to worry about him. But it is very like the hare and the tortoise. It's like Olivia Colman is my favorite example of person
yes,
who's just like tottered along, done good jobs, but like I don't know how old she was when she won her Oscar, but you know, you're like, she hit superstardom so that she just was a great actor, just like slowly
Mm,
climbing the ladder bit by bit by bit, you know. So
yeah.
yeah.
In her Oscar speech, she said, "Oh, I used to work as a cleaner, and I loved that job." And I thought, there you go. You know, she probably took some time away. She was a cleaner, and a lot of people say,
Yeah.
"How can you be a cleaner? You're an actor." What? But she loved it. She owned that
Yeah.
job. So wherever it is, your side hustle, whether it's tutoring or go people or whatever it is, enjoy it. But just and then you'll find the
And
universe.
it does make you a better actor. That's the other key thing
Yeah,
that is definitely true that someone said to me when I was younger, and I have absolutely seen that people who have other things going on in their life, to be an actor, you need to be able to like live. You need to
yes,
live and you
yeah,
need to observe people in different scenarios and you need to just like have a bit of life. And I think sometimes people can stagnate as actors when they have more jobs,
yeah,
which sounds like a silly thing, but you see it occasionally where you're like, because they've just become actors. And actually, that's another thing that I think is like glamorized in our industry is like being a person who's like, all I want to do is act. And you're like, that's not necessarily like a badge of honor. You
yeah,
know, like there should be more to your life because otherwise you're quite a boring actor. You know, like you should have other hobbies and you should travel, you know, if you're lucky enough to be able to afford to, like you should travel, you should go on holiday, you know, and you should take time to, and you should do these other jobs because like you learn more and you see more when you're working with people that aren't acting can be such a little echo chamber and like yeah
yeah,
you benefit from having other things go on in your
yeah.
life,
And
whether that's cleaning, tutoring,
yeah.
going on a holiday, whatever it is.
Yeah, and of course, like when you experience life, you experience because ultimately acting is replicating real life in front of an audience's
Mm-hmm.
eyes and brains, and you know
Mm-mm.
whatever it is. But when you sort of go out and you sort of try new things, you might meet people who have like a mannerism or have a voice which you think,
Mm-hmm.
oh, that's really good. I like that. You just log it
Mm-hmm.
away. And there's a great story of Kelsey Grammer. You know, you've seen Frasier, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and he's also Sideshow Bob in the Simpsons. And he said when he was a struggling actor, he was painting bathrooms, hanging wallpaper and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And he worked with a guy called Ellis Rabb, who
Mm-hmm.
was the inspiration for Sideshow Bob. And then years later, because and this guy Ellis Rabb was, I think he was an actor. He was in the
Yeah.
arts and stuff.
Yeah.
And he would come home and he would sound like Sideshow Bob and be like, "Oh, I'm gonna try and do a Sideshow Bob now impression. It's probably gonna fail miserably, but here we go." It would be like he would go, "Oh, Kelsey, that baby should have been mine," or something like that.
That was good. That was
So,
good.
oh, thank you. And he said in an interview, like he would say these things and he'd go, "Do you know what, this guy? I'm going to use him someday." And then when he read the script for Sideshow Bob, he said, right, this is Ellis Rabb. So,
Yeah.
and the point of that story is that if you go out and you try something, you might meet someone or some people who have these little things, and that makes you a better actor. And there's
Absolutely.
opportunities. Yeah. Anyway,
Absolutely.
oh, there's so many great stories out there. But anyway, so I mentioned in the intro about Go People is that it's a company that specializes in quite intimate drama, anyway, or intimate practice. What made you want to, why intimacy exactly?
Okay. So first of all, small theatres are cheapest
Of course.
is the honest answer.
Yeah.
Um, but the emotional answer, which is also the honest answer, is that I have almost never, never is an extreme, but almost never been really moved in the West End. I
Okay.
have almost always been very moved when I'm in like the Donmar
Mm.
or the Young Vic or, you know, going to something at the Hen and Chickens or the Red Lion or the Finborough. It's like I am aware as an audience member that the smaller the audience and the closer I am to the stage, um, the more magnetic I have always found the piece. So I think we at the beginning were aware that small spaces was obviously all we could do, but we always kind of had this dream that we didn't ever want to go that big.
Mhm.
Um, it yeah. So and then that pushed us really far in that we then started what Revels in Hand is, which is this literally taking place into people's homes. So I
Mm.
think we just became real fans of like how intimate can we make a show, and that was fun
Yeah.
to push the boundaries.
Yeah, because like you're up close and personal with people, and like in the West End, like if you go to like the Savoy, which is it's a beautiful theatre, but it's very
Mm,
grand, and it's very
mm-mm.
very tall, and it's if you're sat in the gods, you're like looking down at these tiny little stick men on stage, and you
Yeah.
see what's going on.
And of course,
Yeah,
actually, different shows suit different things. Musicals are great for big places, and they work wonderfully. And in terms of a big space that is brilliant, Regent's Park Open Air Theatre is one of my favourite theatres in the whole of London. And
yeah,
that is not really intimate at all, but it's just big and flashy and fabulous. And I've had some of the best nights at the theatre there. But yes, generally, I think for plays, I have very rarely been really moved when I'm in the West End because either, like you say, you're up in the gods, or you're down at the front and it's being played for the gods,
yeah,
so it's big performances and they're brilliant, but they're big. So you don't sort of feel they're
yeah.
not hyper
It's
realistic.
like right in your face, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I just as an audience member have always preferred smaller spaces. So I think we were keen to capitalize on that as much as possible.
Yeah, I tell you what, another theatre which does that brilliantly is the
Mm.
Bush Theatre.
Oh,
Yeah,
100%. The Bush
yes,
is amazing.
it's
Amazing.
incredible. I saw a play there recently called My Father's Fable, which was written by
Oh
Faith
yeah.
Amol. I'm sorry, Faith, if I've pronounced your name
Yeah.
wrong. But yeah, it's a story about a family and everything. I won't give it away, but the fact
Mm.
you felt like you were in this
Mm.
family's living room. You were there. You were pushed up against
Mm.
and everything. And I don't know if you've had this experience at the Bush, but it almost felt a little bit like the Globe. Like people were actively getting involved. Like people were going, just like a line will go, "I'm moving away," and a lady just in front of me just went, good man, yes."
Yes.
And I thought, you do not get this in the West.
So I saw Shifters, which is now transferred to the West End, and everyone should go and see it because it's brilliant. I think it's just transferred for a month or so over the summer.
Okay,
Shifters was on at the Bush first, and absolutely what you just said there. It's like a rom-com, and there were, I mean, it's not really a com. It's a sort of romantic drama about these two people who obviously had a bit of a relationship when they were kids, and they've just come back together as adults. And the audience were really getting involved. You're right. It was amazing. The audience were really like going and like, like absolutely like gasping when bad things were done. And like, yeah, I mean, it was, yeah, you're right. It's the Bush is a really magical place.
yeah,
It's great.
it really, really is. So you're it's still about intimacy. You had a
Mm.
seven actor cast of A Midsummer Night's Dream.
Mm.
How did that come about?
So that was when we first started Go People, we very quickly accidentally landed on this idea of doing plays privately as well.
Okay,
That happened in the first year of Go People. And now they exist under two different names. Go People is like a public production company, and Revels in Hand is this private service in which people can hire sort of, world-class actors to do plays in their homes. When we first started the private side, uh, we did an amazing big launch. Actually, this wasn't when it started. A few years into it, we did a big sort of rebrand and a launch event.
yeah,
And Lynn Gardner wrote an article in Stage that was basically like, this is exactly what's wrong with theatre.
yeah.
Because,
The
it's expensive and
yeah,
it's
yeah,
only, a tiny demographic of people that could afford to hire us. And she was sort of saying, this is the problem with theatre is, making it exclusive. Obviously, our response is we do public things as well. It is essentially like Shakespeare's King's Men. We are doing this to keep ourselves financially going and to pay our actors and to keep them in the business and to keep them working so that we can then do these public things.
mhm,
Like the public can't exist without, unfortunately, the way this world works, without the patronage of wealthy people who give their money to the arts, and you have to give them something in return. So
yeah,
it was sort of our equivalent of that. Very early on in doing these private things, before it was known as Revels in Hand, we used to just call it Go People Private Theatre. And we wanted to see if there was a market out in the Hamptons, because I
mhm.
think I mentioned earlier I'd done a tutoring job once
Yeah, you
out
did.
in the
Yeah,
Hamptons,
yeah,
and so I'd sort of seen that world, and I was like, I think this would go down very well here. So we sort of wanted to see if there was a market out there, and so the family that I tutored for, they were like, well, why don't you come over and do a play for us in our garden, and we'll invite like the great and the good of the town and all this sort of thing.
the local
Um,
community.
Yeah. And so they were going to basically donate a bit of money towards our costs for doing it, but they weren't paying us or anything. And so we had minimal funds and we wanted to take them a Shakespeare. And so all we could afford was to take over 7 people. It was literally like 7 mates flying over to America to do a play in this fancy house. And so it was a lovely, like, my favorite phrase in the world, necessity is the mother of invention. It was one of those classic things of, we can only afford to go over if there's 7 of us. So how can we do a Shakespeare play with only 7 actors? And I was immediately like, I bet we could do Dream, because Dream is so separated into the different plots, the
Yeah.
mechanicals, the lovers, the fairies. I was like, there's got to be a way where we can double up on all of them.
Yeah.
So we did I did a very quick cut of the play that we then read it, and it was like 40 minutes long or something. And I remember Freddie saying, you have stripped all the poetry out of
Oh.
out of Shakespeare. So we
Need
then
the
went back and
poetry.
like, yeah,
The
we went
poetry.
back and like made it 90 minutes, made it longer again. And my brother at the time was like, yeah, I'll do. I mean, it was just a romp, it was just like a bunch of mates trying to make something.
Mm.
And so my brother was like, yeah, I'll direct it. And he'd had this idea that we could excuse the fact that there were only 7 of us by doing the famous scene where the mechanicals are cast in their different parts and Bottom keeps wanting to take all the parts.
Mm.
Simon was like, maybe we could rewrite that scene at the beginning, but as Go People. So it's like you're casting the play and you're realizing that you don't have enough actors for all the parts. And there can be one of you who keeps wanting to play multiple parts, like Bottom. And anyway, this was like 7 years ago. So Simon wrote 8 or 9 years ago. So Simon wrote this opening scene based on the mechanicals scene where we all divvied out the parts. We realized there weren't enough of us. And then we sort of decided that we were going to have to use the audience's imagination um, to help, because we're going to have to play lots of different parts each, and we're going to have to describe the set to you and all of this sort of thing. And then we did the play. And when we took it over to the Hamptons, and it was great. And then when we came back, we did a performance of it at the club at the Ivy, because we'd started to have a relationship with members clubs and sort of bringing plays to the clubs.
Yeah.
So we did it at the club at the Ivy, and there was a theatre producer called Gareth Lake who runs Glass Half Full Productions, which is a really big West End production company.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we knew him already, and I think he might have come to sort of support us. I think he was an Ivy Club member as well, and he saw this 7 actor version of Dream, and at the end he was like, "That is the best Shakespeare play I've ever seen, and I think we should produce this publicly, and I'll do it with you." So that's how we ended up doing the Midsummer Night's Dream at the Southwark Playhouse. And before we then put it on, it went through a big rewrite again, and Simon added a lot more of this sort of moments where actually we jumped out of the script to sort of speak to the audience and describe what's happening, and sort of taking the mickey out of like the concept and what we were doing. And we cast Freddie Fox and Maddie Hill in it, which was also quite sad because obviously the cast we had originally done it in, we had the incredible Henry Gilbert and Abigail Angel in it as well.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously when you start putting things on, you're like, you need stars, you need names, or a show won't sell. So we brought Freddie and Maddie on, who were both remarkable, and we were such a happy cast. Like it is absolutely my favorite thing I've ever done is produce and be in that Midsummer Night's Dream. It was like, and the response we got from the audience, it was like really magic. And I remember Freddie Fox saying on press night, like we were all very emotional,
Yeah.
and we got this huge standing ovation. It was really emotional. And I remember Freddie coming off stage and going, I have never felt like that after a press night like that. It was just a really cool thing. And sadly, the broadsheet reviews were all like really middling. And interestingly, they all used, not all, a lot of them used the word smug. And to a certain extent, I think we were smug. I think we thought we'd made something really great.
Yeah.
But the sad thing is the audiences loved it. And bloggers and online reviews, like all other reviews, loved it. It was all like 5 stars, 5 stars. And the broadsheets just, there was something about us and our enthusiasm and our smugness that they did not like. And sadly, reviews really, really, really matter. And I remember being in absolute tears, the day after press night when I read them, because I just knew, I think we really felt we'd made something very special. And sadly, it really is the case in this industry that like you do need the reviewers to get behind you. And if they don't, I know we all hear these stories like, oh, Les Mis was badly reviewed at first. And, there are things that were badly reviewed and years later they get brought back and then everyone sort of sees it in the way that you always hoped they would. But as a general rule, you can have brilliant shows, and if the reviewers just don't get behind it, like you can't keep them going, because so many transfers and things, they rely on reviews. So to this day, my brother and I are always like, we'll do it again someday. We'll do that 7-Actor Dream. But yeah, it was so special. It was it was a good time. It's a good time.
Yeah, it sounds fun. If you have any openings for actors in that show, you know where to find. I'm there for you. I think that's a good lead on actually, because in just mentioning your own podcast there with the great Sean Dooley, one thing you talked about in that was how I think you spoke about reviews in that episode, and I think he says actively he doesn't read reviews.
Oh yeah, don't know how he does it.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned earlier you were in that Jamie Lloyd production, but it was a non-speaking part. And so when the reviews came out, you were like, "Oh, I don't care. I'm just going to look them up."
Yeah, exactly. I was like, I'm not gonna. I think Jamie was like, I know, I don't want anyone to read reviews, and I was like, that's obviously because you don't want anyone to be affected by stuff that's written about them. No one's going to be writing about me. So I was like, I'm going to read them because no, I'm not going to care. But yeah, I'd find it very hard.
Yeah, but Sean makes a good point. I think Sean, you makes a good point of saying like he just, as long as, well, for the vibe I got was that as long as he feels like he's happy with what he's doing, then it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks, and he just did The Hills of California at the Pinter, and now that's going to, he's going to Broadway with it now, isn't he?
Is it?
Yeah, I think
I didn't know that. Oh, that's so good.
Yeah, I've heard it's going to Broadway. I don't know if it's the same cast, so Sean, if you're listening, hope you're there. Hope you have a good time, mate.
Yeah.
I think that would be a good thing to do.
I mean, I think he's absolutely right. Like, much as I'm like, oh, I don't know how he does, he's right. He's definitely right.
Yeah.
I think, we're all better off not reading.
Yeah, no, because there's stories of, there's another actor story from Lucian Masmati, who's done so much stuff. He was Salieri in Amadeus and the National a few years ago. He's just about to do Waiting for Godot with Ben Whishaw at the Haymarket.
Oh, yes. Okay, wow. Right, yeah.
And I've got tickets for that. I'm so freaking excited. Yeah, there's a play I wanted to see for ages, but he told a story. He was, I think he said it, he was at the RSC, and he was one of the kings, Richard II, Richard III, I'm not sure which one it was, but he played this performance one night. He was really happy with it, and the audience leapt to their feet, and he goes to read the reviews in the local newspaper the next day, and the reviews just tore him apart and everything. And I'm sure that his performance wasn't as bad as they were making out, because Lucian doesn't give a bad performance. I love your work, mate, if you're listening. And I think he made a point of saying, look, people can write what they want. People can do what they want to do, but ultimately they don't know. And I think this is a good point to make as well. Audiences don't know what you have put into that performance to get to where it is now. And similar to your work, or not only your performances in Midsummer Night's Dream as well, but the effort you went into to adapt the play, to take it to the Hamptons, to get these 7 people together, to put it on in someone's backyard or someone else's, they don't know what you've been through. They just take one look at you guys and go, they're smug. And it's like, well, hang on a second. But you've built it up yourself. You've got people together. You've written it yourself. You and your brother putting it all together.
Yeah.
And okay, fine. It's not your cup of tea, but at least acknowledge that.
Oh, what really wound me up? I mean, again, I should just let it go. But what really wound me up, I remember at the time, was that 2 things. One was that there did feel like there was a sense when, and of course, as a producer, unfortunately, you do have to read them. You need to know what's being said.
The downside to the job.
But I think there was a sense across all of them that they, like with the word smug, that they felt we needed taking down a peg or two. Like just reading them, it felt like for whatever reason, this particular chunk of reviewers and journalists, thought we were above our station in some way. That's sort of how it read. And I just remember being like, we are nobodies. Like, who are you taking down a peg or two? Like, we've got nowhere to fall. Like, we are not on a pedestal. Like, we are young theatre makers desperately trying to make our own work. And of course, if we've made a bad show, I'm not expecting you to say it's good for the sake of it, but we haven't made a bad show. Like, it is objectively not a bad show. And you can see from the audience reaction every night that they're loving it. So even if you didn't love it, surely you've got to appreciate that, or some people do. I think I said this on my podcast, that I heard a phrase once, which is that a good reviewer's job, or a good reviewer, should see their job as finding the audience for the play. So even if they're not the audience, it's like, who would enjoy this? Which I think is a nice way of looking at it. And I certainly felt with that, there were even a couple of reviews that sort of went, God, if you're not a Shakespeare expert, like, stay away, almost implying you won't even know what's going on. And I thought, it is the polar opposite of that. Like, because Maddie Hill was in it, and Maddie had been a big EastEnders fan, we had a lot of EastEnders fans coming. And a lot of those EastEnders fans had never set foot in a theatre, never come to see a Shakespeare play. Like, it just wasn't their bag. They were coming because they loved Maddie. And they were coming in and, like, staying around afterwards to speak to us and tweeting about it and messaging us and everything, being like, I never thought I'd get Shakespeare. Like, I never thought I'd enjoy Shakespeare. And that was I had the best night, So I just think it was another instance where I went, it's fine to give your opinion. It's of course fine to give your opinion. But, like, the way sometimes what's troublesome about reviews is the way in which they present opinion as fact. Like, if you don't know Shakespeare well, you won't get this. I was like, that's wrong, because we have lots of people who've never seen Shakespeare. We've got them through the door and they're loving it. So I don't know. The reviewing thing, it's difficult. I do think, back on Sean's point as well, though, I actually think I would find it easier to not read reviews if I was like a lead part. I think at the moment, a bit like what I said with the Jamie Lloyd one, where I was like, oh, I don't care, because what are they going to say about me? Even when I've been in smaller parts, I think to a certain extent, I'm like, I don't think they're necessarily going to talk about me. Or if they do, even if they say something bad, they're not going to give me more than a sentence. Like, I'm not going to be fazed by this. Whereas I think if I were doing a big part, I am aware that, of course, like most people in the world, I am not immune to being distressed by someone criticizing my performance, and even the podcast, for instance, like when I first released Hear Me Out, I got a load of press, and I think it was Lynn Gardner again. Oh my God, I'm going to start sounding like Lynn Gardner is my mortal enemy. I think Lynn Gardner reviewed the podcast, and it was basically a fine review. It was 3 stars. And I remember she said something like, there's a little too much of, Lucy Eaton's enthusiastic gasps and oohs and ahs, or something like that. And I realized to my distress that, like, I'd really absorbed that and taken that on board, because in subsequent interviews I'd catch myself,
once it's in here,
I'd catch myself infusing in some way, and I'd be like, oh, don't do that too much. I found myself adapting, which is the reason why, as an actor, we should not be reading reviews, because like you say, that is someone's opinion, and they have every right to have an opinion. That doesn't mean you should change your performance. So yes, I think yes, we all need to take a leaf out of Sean's book.
Yeah, of course we do. I think another thing, I listen to my shows back sometimes, and I go, I'm very aware that I go, it's like, oh yeah.
Oh, I do that all the time, yeah.
And I'm going, oh my God, I'm saying that word a lot of the time, aren't I?
Oh, I know, but like no one else notices. Exactly. Well, except Lynn Gardner notices with me, but like no one else notices.
Name drop. There you go. Lady Gaga.
Not a good one. Not a good one. Yeah. Oh, I feel you. I feel you.
Anyway, but with Go People, like, this is, I don't mean to sort of turn this into like a business sort of like sector tangent or whatever, but so in terms of like how you're running it with your business partners, okay, so say you've got a play, you know what you want to do with it. What's like the stages from rehearsal to pitching it to theaters? Well, how does that all work?
Right question. Okay, so right now, for instance, Okay, no, okay, I'll go back to the first one. So one of the first things we did, which was Almost Maine at Park Theatre,
Yeah.
we found a play we loved, and you literally email all the theatres, you message all the theatres, and you're like, do you want this? There's a certain group of theatres you're going to get early on. So like, or you'll at least be considered by, which is all the theatres in a pub, all the rooms above a pub. At the top end of the scale, it's like the Finborough, Park, Southwark. You know, these are all the places that you go to. Anything above that, at that early stage, it's not really worth even getting in touch with. A lot of the other theatres that I love, for instance, they're they don't co-produce. So even now, when we're a bit bigger and we've done a fair few things, like we're unlikely to ever get something in the LAMDA because they make their own stuff and you know, things like that. But anyway, so yeah, you email all the theatres. Often the theatre wants a budget, like when you email them, or before they consider it, they sort of want to know what the play would cost. I mean, that's sort of it. And then I'm trying to think. I mean, it's been such a long time because it was pre-COVID that we last produced publicly, which was Daisy Pulls It Off. You then sort of have to, I mean, again, about cost, like we've doubled the budgets of our shows almost every time we've done a show. Like the first time we ever did a show, which was Waterloo East Theatre, the budget was like £2,000. You know, none of us got paid. We literally paid probably £1.5 was just for the theatre or something, and then some props and costume. It was £2,000. Almost Maine had a budget of something like 24,000. And again, that was definitely Mel and Freddie and I not being paid, and the other actors being below equity minimum. Midsummer Nights Dream had a budget of about 55,000, which was all the actors on equity minimum. Daisy Pulls It Off was over 100,000. So it's like, it's almost doubled every time. But that, as an example, Daisy Pulls It Off was a Christmas show at Park Theatre in the big space. That has a budget of about £100,000. So like, to do that, you then need to obviously raise the investment. Of course, at the beginning, you're like, ideally, we find theatre angels who just want to give us the money. That's very hard to do. Of course, the dream absolutely should be the dream, but it's very hard to do. So you've got to find investors, which means you've got to go to people. You've got to create a really good investment pack with lots of numbers in it, because anyone who's willing to give your money, they're going to want to see all the number crunching that goes, this is how many tickets you need to sell for me to start seeing some money back. Realistically, theatre is a very bad business model, as my very smart business husband always tells me. It's sort of like it shouldn't be a business. Like it works so badly because with the exception of a handful of things that are mostly the long running musicals that are going for ages, theatre just can't make the money back. So when you're doing shows in these small spaces, even more so, the smaller the space, the less likely it is that you're gonna get the money back. So you know, when you're going to speak to these investors, you're sort of aware that your package is not good, but they just want to know. They want to know, see everything in black and white. You know, ideally, you want a situation where like your break even is 60 or 70%. You know, if you can sell 60 or 70% of your tickets, it's probably worth giving it a go. So even if you sold out from day one, which you never will, but even if you sold out from day one, the investors aren't going to make much. But as James Bierman, who is a brilliant West End producer, as James Bierman once said to me, you're looking for people who just like the flutter. You know, it's people who they want to be in on the chance, and they know that probably their money is not going to come back to them, but like they think that it might, and it might make a lot of money, and that's fun. So you've got to find the people where they think there's fun in that. And they love theatre, and they'll enjoy like coming to press night and all of this sort of thing. But yeah, I feel like I'm the least good person to give the business side of it. You need a Francesca Moody or something, because we've actually, because since pre-COVID, obviously COVID got in the way of so many plans, we haven't produced publicly. We ended up really focusing on Rebels in Hand. We are now only just now beginning to produce publicly again. So we're in the phase now of, we have two particular plays we're pushing at the moment, and one of them we think we have just found the venue, but that venue will involve us doing it next summer. So that's very common lead time as well. It can take, you know, often when you start, like the play is a year away from happening. So yes, I feel like I've been very uninformative there.
No,
Love
not
to get a Francesca Moody on.
not in the slightest. No, you've really sort of made me think there. I was like, oh, I didn't realize that was part of it, and the whole financial
Mm,
side of it as well. So yeah, no, don't be hard on yourself. No, that
mm,
was good. That was helpful. That was helpful,
good.
Lucy. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. You're welcome.
Yeah,
You're
it's
most
very, very
welcome.
good. Yeah, that's very good. That's another great episode of yours, by the way. Francesca Moody, she's
Yeah.
fantastic. But for anyone who doesn't know, she was behind Baby Reindeer and the
Mm,
original Fleabag. So
yeah.
yeah, there's
She's
a
amazing.
yeah. So a big shout out to her. So I've been in touch
Mm.
with your agent, Francesca. So you haven't heard the last of it.
Oh, yeah. You should speak to Francesca. She's amazing.
Oh yeah, yeah, no, no, but she's in
Mm.
the end of a fringe right now, so
Of
she's
course she
she's a,
is.
she's a little busy. So
Of
but
course. Of
yeah, but
course.
watch this space, guys. One for the
Mm-mm.
future.
Mm.
But so I suppose the next bit really, just very quick aside there. I presume like you mentioned James Bierman there, who
Mm.
I've talked about on the show a few times.
Mm.
That he when you say the what was the phrase again? The flutter.
The flutter. Yeah, you're looking for someone who likes the flutter. Yeah.
Yeah, I presume like that. What I got from that was, if you read something and the material is brilliant,
Mm,
obviously
mm,
there's
mm,
no funding for it, there's no theatre yet, it's
mm, mm,
literally
mm.
still just a script right now. But I think if someone reads it and they can see the potential in this, then they go, okay, right, we're not in the advanced stages of this at all just yet, but what we've got here is
Mm,
good, and I think
mm,
they've got a solid foundation there where they know what the show is going to be good because the
mm,
writing is
mm,
good, and so
mm.
therefore our journey from here to opening night makes it slightly easier in a way because you've got
So
something good.
almost, I think partly, well, two things from that. First of all, I think I read what James said to me there almost as like people who like it's like gambling.
Mm.
People who like the excitement of like, I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
know if I'm gonna,
and anything can happen. Yeah,
anything could happen. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Um, but also there was an interesting thing you said there where you were like, you read it, it's not fully fledged yet, but like you can see the writing's good or something. I actually think a more important thing is how marketable it is. Like that's the biggest, actually, that's one of the biggest things that I think I've learned since producing is
Okay.
that in the early days, we would read plays and go, I like this play, let's put it on. And then you'd have to sit down and go, it's a bit like elevator pitches for a business. It's
Yeah.
like, what's the elevator pitch for this play? Like, what are the articles? Because you can't, to go back to my thing about reviews being really important, press is really important as well. Like,
Mm.
you need to be producing something going, why would someone write about this? Because we need them to. So, in a way, it's one of the things, actually, one of my least favorite things about the industry, but that's why you get so many worthy plays. I
Yeah.
think because people are like, this is current, and someone might write about this situation because it's a current situation, and all this sort of thing, which ultimately kills theatre because it's so boring. And what you want to do is go, you should put this on and you should come and see it because it's fun and it'll be escapist and it'll be
Yeah.
lovely,
Yeah.
which is true. And that's absolutely our MO. Like we just want to make theatre that where people are not thinking about the rest of their lives for a moment. We want total fun and escapism.
Mm.
Even within that realm of like fun escapist stuff, and come and see the show just because it's really good, we still have to go into it with, but also how are we going to get people to write about it? What is it going to be? Is it that there's some superstar celebrity in it?
Mm.
Like the Jamie Lloyd things, that's what they're doing. They're like, if I put Tom Holland in a play, everyone will write about it because Tom Holland is in a play. So
Yeah.
that's one avenue. Another avenue could be we're putting on this story because like there was a show we really wanted to produce that we still hopefully will one day, but it's not cheap. It's like got seven, I think a cast of seven again, which is not a small cast. I mean, again, the 7 actor dream, like that's quite ambitious. um it's a cast of seven, and it's got a lot of tech stuff in it, so it's just going to be quite an expensive show. So I hope one day we'll do it, but ultimately the play is about a group of high school girls in America who all start to develop Tourette's.
Hmm.
And they almost seem to catch it, and they realize it's psychosomatic, that they're almost catching it off each other. And it's all based on a true story of a place in America, like about 15 years ago, where kids started to develop tics. And they couldn't work out why, and they ended up realizing it was completely psychosomatic. They were all catching it off each other.
Mm.
Anyway, we've always wanted to do this play. During well, first of all, we were like, what is the premise? Like, what is the art? What are the headlines? What's the elevator pitch? The elevator pitch is the Crucible meets Bring It On. Like, that's the elevator pitch, you know. So you need to be like, that's how we make it sound sexy to people.
Yeah.
And then, but we were still like, but why would everyone write about it now? Like, it's new writing and, you know, all this sort of thing. And then during COVID, these news reports came out that girls were developing tics from watching girls with Tourette's on TikTok. Like, there were a few TikTok influencers who were girls who suffered from Tourette's that were really popular during COVID, going absolutely viral. And other girls were starting to develop tics from watching. And it's so interesting because it's a female thing. And it's happened throughout history where like women on a psychosomatic level pick up subconscious things from each other. So it's super interesting. But the minute that came out, that news story during COVID, we were like, we've got to do the play. We've got to do the play now. Oh my God, go, 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 go. You know, because you're like, now there's a reason why people might write about this play because there's something current going on. And, you know, so I think we obviously didn't end up doing the play, but it's just worth saying, like, yes, to go back to your original point, which is like, why might someone choose to invest in something? It's like, the main thing is you've got to be able to make it into a package that looks like something you're going to find easy to sell.
Yeah.
And ultimately, if you can't make it easy to sell, it doesn't matter how much you like it. Of course, sorry, before I even say what I'm about to say, do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Put on whatever plays you want. And if you love the play, put it on. But if you want to put something on and you want to make money, or you want to put something on and hopefully not lose loads of money, at least, you have to pick things that you've got to pick things based on the fact that they're marketable.
Yeah, because ultimately you want to speak to people and make a good point about stuff. Like examples being, you know, Prima Facie, again, another show I've talked about a lot. The law, you know, the laws on sexual assault, sorry, you know, how they need to change. And even, you know, we mentioned Baby Reindeer earlier, just how, you know, people always talk about, there's violence, men on women and stuff like that, and all that has to change. But sometimes men can be the victims as well. You know, everyone and anyone, no matter who you are,
absolutely
can be a victim. And that was a story which, you know, and I think Baby Reindeer was like a story of like, you can't write stuff like that. And when you feel like that was actually Richard Gadd's story, and it's like, I mean, I could give you chapter and verse on my opinions on Baby Reindeer and stuff, but but ultimately what it was is about finding stuff that was actually important and ultimately human. And did you ever see A Monster Calls at the Old Vic?
No, I know the story, but no, I didn't see it.
Yeah, well, I've had a few people on the show, Stu and Goodwin, who was the monster, or the U3, and Dan Canham, who is the movement director.
Right.
Yeah, and it's a story about how basically a young boy's mother is dying in front of him, and this tree visits him, tells him three tales, and all of them are about truth. And the fourth one is Connor, which is the character Connor O'Malley, and will be his truth, and that's all I'll say. And ultimately, it's about humans, the human condition, and how truthful we all are, and how the mind contradicts itself on a daily basis. So you mean one thing, but you say another. And I think there's a brilliant moment between Connor and the tree when he says, "Well, why did humans do this? Why is this the case?" And the tree's response was, because humans are complicated beasts. And I thought that's very, very real. And and also from a human level, but marketable and very, very present and very, very true as well. So so that's what I think the theatres.
Brilliant.
Yeah, that's what makes them. That's what makes them brilliant. If you go and watch plays about someone wanting to turn into a frog, then I think you might be disappointed. So
I agree. Yeah, we won't put that one on.
No. Particularly in West End prices as well. You don't want
exactly. No one to book that. No.
We don't want that. Staged. The lockdown drama that graced our screens as we're all locked up in our homes and everything throughout that weird time. First of all, great job in the show, by the way. I thought you did very well. Of course, and also shout out to your brother Simon Evans, who wrote it and stars in it as
Simon
well.
Evans.
Yeah, he's brilliant. I love your work, man, Simon. Thank you for that. So, well, first of all, before we get into the show itself, how was lockdown for you?
I had a very lovely time. I was very lucky because we
Yeah,
were making staged.
yeah.
I locked down. I lived at the time in a very dark, damp basement flat in Fulham.
Mhm.
And my now husband and I had sort of seen what was happening in Italy with COVID, and we were like, "Oh my God, if that
Yeah.
comes here, like it would really suck to be in this flat and not be allowed to leave." So we had sort of had a chat with my brother actually, weeks before lockdown was imposed, and been like, if it comes here, we're not staying in London, right?
No.
So the three of us had all decided to go back to my parents' house, which is in the countryside. So we were five people locked down together. So we actually went back like a week before lockdown hit. We'd all already left London.
Mhm.
I think we just sort of saw what was coming. So yeah, so we were five people locked down, which is challenging in some ways when you are grown adults living under your parents' roof. Very challenging, but also wonderful in other
Yeah.
ways because, well, a lot of the world were suffering from loneliness and isolation. We had a little team of five, so I think we felt incredibly lucky to have that. Admittedly, sometimes we wished we could be alone, but we also had a really, we made the best of it and we had some really lovely times. And then on top of that, Simon and I obviously ended up making staged throughout it,
Yeah.
which was just such a gift. So I feel very lucky. I cannot complain. It was such an awful time for so many people.
Yeah.
But yes, making staged in particular was just mad, like such a lovely, weird, beautiful little thing to come
Mm.
out of it.
Yeah. Do you remember like the first time that Simon came to you saying, "Look, I've got this idea," because I would imagine he was doing a lot of Zoom calls throughout that time as well.
Yeah. Oh well, it was very organic and slowly, like it's all based on reality. I mean, Simon was meant to be directing a play. um I think it was in Chichester
Mhm.
in the May or June, right over that lockdown. So when lockdown happened, the play was obviously postponed. It ended up never happening, but it was postponed.
Um,
And there was a point where, in a conversation, someone suggested that Simon could rehearse with people over Zoom so that it was ready to go as soon as lockdown eased up. And around the same time, Simon was in conversations with a guy who was producing a film that Simon was meant to be directing that summer,
mm.
and that was also being postponed. And this producer, who's Finn Glynn, who's an amazing film producer, part of Infinity Hill, who are amazing, he was he had sort of said to Simon, "Oh, I wonder if there's something we can make over while we're locked down that we could use to send to actors afterwards to try and get them on board." Basically, because Simon hadn't done much film or TV up till that point. There were a
Yeah.
lot of actors they were trying to get on board for the film who were excited and interested, but slightly nervous that they'd never seen any of Simon's work on film or screen.
Okay.
Or TV, sorry. So Finn was sort of going, is there something we could just make while we're locked down, And those two things came together, like Finn and Simon wanting to make something, anything, and then Simon having this idea based on reality of, a play that is rehearsed over Zoom with the idea of it, being ready to go when the lockdowns ease up. And so when you say, "Oh, do you remember the first time he came and said, oh, I've got an idea for something?" In a way, no, because everything was so itty bitty. It was like one day he'd be like, "Oh, Finn thinks we should make something," and then the next day he might have been going, "Well, yeah, we got this funny idea." Da, 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 da.
Yeah.
And then it was like they sort of made this vague idea for a pilot or for a scene of it. He wrote a scene of it, and then Finn knew David Tennant and was like, "I'm just going to send it to David and just see what he thinks." And David comes back and, says he really likes it. And David was like, "Do you want me to send it to Michael?" So suddenly there was a day where it was like, I think Michael Sheen's going to read it. And then they basically came on board. And I think at that point, it probably wasn't even a full episode that was written. It was like an idea. It was like, do you want to try it? Because then, of course, Simon rewrote it all to be David Tennant and Michael Sheen, because so much of the characters, they are versions of themselves. So he
Mm.
will have then rewritten the whole thing to be them. And then I think there was a point where I was going to be the director. But then very quickly he realized that there was going to be humor in how awful they were to the director. And he didn't feel that doing that to a female director would be very funny at the moment in
No,
this day and
no,
age when we're still sort of fighting to be recognized. He was like, it's not going to be funny. So
no.
then it was like, okay, Simon's going to be the director because then he can be more of a punching bag. And it was decided that yes, for each of those sort of central three, like David and Michael and Simon, there should be someone in the household that they can interact with.
Yeah.
And fortunately, Georgia and Anna, Michael and David's partners, are both actresses, and I'm obviously an actress. So it was like, okay, we're going. And even then it was like, let's make a pilot. Is everyone willing to make this pilot for free? And then we'll see if anyone will buy it. So everyone, Michael and David included, just did it for fun, really. Again, we were free, like we weren't doing anything. But so everyone just did it for fun. And then I do remember the day that the BBC bought it, because I have a picture of my brother standing on the stairs of our childhood home, like laughing, just laughing, because he was like, the BBC have bought it. And it took us about a month. It took us about a month to make that pilot episode. And then it was like, right, they want 6 more episodes in the next month. It was almost that quick. It was sort of, can you make the rest of the series? Because of course it was so of its time.
Yeah.
The BBC were obviously like, we like this idea, but like, we need to put it out now.
Yeah.
It really was like, can you make another 6 episodes? And then it was almost like one episode was being filmed as another one was being edited, so it could be ready to go out, and it was madness.
Yeah. Yeah. How did you film it? Did you actually use laptops, or was it all cameras?
It was laptops. It was laptops with a certain program on your laptop that records. And we used to do this for like clapperboard. Simon would be like, act 2, like scene 2, take 1, and we'd all clap. And we'd all have our phones recording the sound as well, so that there could be a good sound recording. So it would always be like, is your computer recording? And you'd all press it. Is your phone recording? And you'd see all these faces being like, okay, so that was, and then there were a few in the first series. There was a little bit of like iPhone recording as well, using Filmic Pro on iPhones. There's a fair few shots that like my husband Tris recorded. There's some drone footage that my husband Tris recorded.
Wow.
Like we did try to sort of implement other shots, but actually I think after the first series we sort of realized that trying to do proper filming on a phone wasn't, it sort of wasn't working in the way that the Zoom stuff was like a new look, a new character, a new, it had a personality of its own. So I think as the series go on, you see a bit less and less of the filming on a phone, and it's more on the Zoom. The world is on the Zoom.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I love the scene where it's a bit of dramatic irony because you've grown up with your brother, of course. You've seen like majority of his work. You've worked together quite a few times.
Yeah.
And there's a scene where, and I think it's the very first episode where you sort of come in and go, David, you got David and Michael on the call, and you walk in and go like, hi guys, no, big fan, nice to meet you. And then they go, and then is it David who asks? I think it's David who asks you actually. So it's like, Lucy, you went, yeah. So have you seen much of Simon's work? No.
No. I found the first series, honestly, like I think I'm the least like myself. Like everyone else, they're obviously not exact versions of themselves, but
the variations,
they are variations of themselves. And certainly like David and Georgia, you're like, that feels very their dynamic between each other and all, whereas Simon and I, the dynamic is totally wrong. Like we are best friends, and I would never speak to Simon like the Michael, like Lucy speaks to Simon in series 1 of Stage. So I found that quite weird because yes, I was just so horrible to him and so unsupportive. But it is funny as well because also obviously in that first one, there are, even though I'm called Lucy and I'm Simon's sister, there are also references to like, I'm meant to be like some hotshot lawyer. I mean, that house is meant to be my house. Like I am the least like me. It is very much not me. And I got people tweeting afterwards. They'd be like, oh my God, I love your house so much. And I'm like, if you think I live in a house like that, you do not understand the acting industry. Like that is not my house. That's not my house. So I found that quite difficult. I felt a lot more relaxed as the series went on. When series version 2, series 2 and series 3 are like, they are basically me. Series 3 is me. And
Yeah,
I found that much nicer, being able to be nice to Simon on the Zoom
yeah,
calls.
it was much nicer.
Yeah, yeah.
No, it was brilliant because I sort of came across it because of David and Michael and everyone, and
Mm.
just it really captured. I remember one of my first earlier episodes actually. We talked about stage actually,
Mm.
and they said with Christian Passion, who's a wonderful actor, he's a Welsh guy, he's a really really lovely guy. We worked together at
Mm.
National a few years ago, and he said that it was like a total love letter to our industry at the time.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
for anyone who wasn't getting what actors were going through, obviously everyone had their struggles in lockdown.
Of course, yeah.
I'm not saying we were the ones struggling the most
No, no, no. But
in the
yeah.
slightest,
Mm-mm.
but you get the idea of how an industry was trying to get through something with the restrictions that we had.
Yeah.
Stage was a perfect example of that, and yeah, I mean it's brilliant what yourself and Simon did there. So I was supposed to say thank
Well,
you.
it's all him. It's him and Finn most of all, but and
Yeah,
everyone else. But I was just happy to be along for the ride.
yeah. Did he show you like edits or
Oh
versions?
yeah, we used to, yeah, absolutely. He'd get to the end of a day of filming with David and Michael, and we'd all sit down to eat, and he'd be like, "Hey guys, do you want to see what I did with David and Michael today?" And we'd be like, "Yeah," and we'd watch it and be like weeping with laughter. I mean, there are cuts and bits that didn't even make it in that were
Oh
so
no.
funny. I mean, there's a lot of outtakes now, so you do see quite a few bits.
Okay,
I
good.
think there's outtakes available somewhere. But yes, we did, and it was just a very silly time. Like the whole Samuel L. Jackson bit. I can't remember who he originally wanted for that, but whoever it was like ambitious, but not Samuel L. Jackson. We were like, bloody hell. I can't remember who it was.
Yeah. Just,
I can't remember, but it was someone where we were like, that's mad. But then I remember this day when he was like, Finn's sending it to Samuel L. Jackson. And we were all like, what?
Samuel L.
What do
Jackson.
you mean? Like, what do you mean he's sending it
The
to Samuel L.
Samuel
Jackson?
L.
Then it's
Jackson.
like, Samuel L. Jackson's going to do it. And we're like, like the whole thing was so mad. And I remember
Yeah.
Samuel L. Jackson obviously was in LA, so he was 8 hours behind. So like he wanted to do it at 9 in the morning so he could go and play golf or something. And so it was like 5 in the afternoon here. And I remember Simon being like, right, guys, everyone be quiet. I've got to go and film with Samuel L. Jackson. And he'd go into the study and shut the door. And I remember just being like pressed to the door, like listening for his voice. So it was a real roller coaster. It was very fun and silly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're just really glad that people loved it so much. Like it, and that
Oh
we
yeah.
ended up doing it for 3 series. And like I found the end of series 2 when I watched it very emotional.
Mm.
Like basically for anyone who hasn't seen it, the very final episode of series 2, you see David and Georgia in their car, so they're not on Zoom. And I think series 2 has almost entirely been on Zoom, and they go and see Michael and Anna, and they stand like at a distance in their masks and like wave at each other. And there's a lovely bit where like it finishes, and then you see essentially like an outtake.
Mm.
At the time, we didn't know we were going to do 3 series. In hindsight, it looks like the perfect lead up to what series 3 was.
Yeah.
But you basically see an outtake. You see a genuine moment where like David realizes he wasn't recording the sound on his phone or something. And I found that so emotional because it was so truthfully like what the experience had been of making it.
Mm.
And then when we did series 3, and that has a very emotional end as well, which I won't
Yeah.
spoil if anyone hasn't seen it. Yeah, I just feel like I'm so grateful that we got to make this. It's the weirdest thing and is so utterly unique. And I read something, I think might have been like the Los Angeles Times or something wrote about it. And they were like, this should be put in a time capsule, and, because it is such a, like you say, it so speaks to our industry, but it's such a perfect.
Yeah.
I probably couldn't rewatch it now, but it would all feel a bit too recent, but in years and years to come, such a perfect encapsulation of like what that time was like.
Mm.
So
It was.
yeah, I just feel very grateful that we could be part of something fun and uplifting.
Oh yeah. Very much so. Very much so. No, you cheered a lot of people, myself included. So
Good.
yeah, yeah. It was
Good.
it was great. And I think we know if we look back on if there was like you say, if there was like someone goes, what was it like those times? What
Like,
was
watch
it?
this.
Yeah, here you go. What's this? And they go, was it really like that? Yes.
Yeah, literally, just like
It
that.
was just like that. That's how we socialized for a good year
Yeah,
or so. Yeah.
yeah,
But it's a weird time, weird time.
yeah,
Thankfully, it's all over now.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But yeah, it's yeah, no, thank you for stage. It really, really was a
You're
refreshing
very welcome.
thing for that. Yeah. And of course, yeah, shout out to Simon, your brother, as well. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
Lucy, I've got so many more questions for you, but if I asked you all of them, it would keep us here for another 2 hours. So,
And my battery is now on 8%. So yes, we
okay,
might have to.
nice. Okay, so let's sort of round up there. We'll do the last. I want to get your speech in as
Oh
well.
yes.
Yes. So if anyone who hasn't listened to Lucy's own show, she asks her guests for their favorite speeches, and she has chosen something from Romeo and Juliet. But we'll get to that in just 1 second. Do two quick fire questions to finish before we get to
Great.
that. So the first one is, what would you say was a piece of advice you wish you heard when you were starting out?
Oh, do your own. And I did hear it. I just didn't listen to it. But make your
Mhm.
own stuff. Make your own stuff. Would be my big one. For your own sanity as much as anything. Like if you can write, write. If you can't write, find a friend who can write and produce. Like put it on yourself. But like just do your own stuff because it's kind of what we talked about earlier. It's not a failure to make your own work. It's actually a badass thing to do. So that would be my
Yeah.
main thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
amen to that.
Mm.
And finally, what would you say was an experience or experiences you've had in your career up to this point that you're never ever going to forget?
Um, I feel like I've probably mentioned them already. Making the Midsummer Nights Dream
Hmm.
was special in a way that will be hard to top. My God, off the top of my head. Oh, as an actor, I did this was working with my brother again. The Resistible Rise of Arturo at the Donmar, which is a Brecht play that is sort of about it's an allegory for Hitler's rise to power, but it's about
Yeah.
gangsters in Chicago. And it happened, it was on around the time when Trump was in power and stuff. And it was like a very political play, and we had a lot of modern references in it. And we had the ability, the Donmar allowed us to sort of tweak and change things almost night by night. If something happened in the news that was worth weaving in, we would weave it in. And it was on over the summer, and it was a really mad summer where like it was just a crazy time in the world. It was like Trump stuff was happening, and I remember the Grenfell fire happened, Grenfell Tower fire happened,
Yeah, yeah,
um, and there was a stabbing. Maybe it was the stabbing around the Houses of Parliament. Like it was just a summer of it was crazy what was happening
yeah.
in the world and what was happening in the news, and it felt like we were just adding things and shifting things and changing, and it was like it felt like we were doing a very current show, and I don't mean that in a bad way, like the show like lived and breathed with the world. So that was quite an amazing um show to do. But then yeah, and all the Revels in Hand stuff. Like I have so loved my company. It is, we are performing for like wealthy people, but it is such a lovely way of giving people like ourselves and our actors who would not ordinarily get to live like that the chance to like have a crazy night in a mad place. Like we did this whole series of shows with the Shangri-La Hotel at the Shard, and we would do the shows, and afterwards we would be allowed to not stay the night, but stay in the suite that we performed in, which is a 10 grand a night suite, and
Mm.
order room service for dinner and then go home. And so it was like all the audience would leave, and at 10 o'clock at night we would get to finish off the champagne they hadn't drunk, and we would order room service dinner, and we'd all sit in this penthouse suite, like not penthouse suite, this like enormous signature suite halfway up the Shard, and look at the lights of London and have our dinner and then go home. And it's like moments like that where you go, oh,
Yeah,
we've just had so many cool memories, just from making our own stuff, So yes, that's a few. That's a few. I'll
brilliant.
probably think of something. I'll wake up in the middle of the night and be like, oh, should have said
Yeah.
that.
So we'll save that for next time. We'll save that for next time. Yeah, we've got, so yeah, you mentioned the Resistible Rise of R2E, but
Mm.
so many questions for you on that. But, that's another, yeah, like I said, another 2 hour slot there. But, but we'll save that for another time. But anyway, so just to finish today, then, so yeah, like I said earlier, you have your own thing on your own podcast. We get your guests to talk about, do their own speech. So this is Juliet,
Oh
performed
my
by
God.
Lucy Eaton.
This is Gallop apace. Gallop apace, you fiery-footed steeds, towards Phoebus' lodging. Such a wagoner as Phaeton would whip you to the west and bring in cloudy night immediately. Spread thy close curtain, love-performing night, that runaways' eyes may wink and Romeo leap to these arms, untalked of and unseen. The lovers can see to do their amorous rites by their own beauties. Or, if love be blind, it best agrees with night. Come, civil night, thou sober-suited matron all in black, and learn me how to lose a winning match, played for a pair of stainless maidenhoods. Hood my unmanned blood bating in my cheeks with thy black mantle, till strange love, grown bold, think true love acted simple modesty. Come, night, come, Romeo, come, thou day in night, for thou wilt lie upon the wings of night, whiter than new snow on a raven's back. Come, gentle night, come, loving, black-browed night, give me my Romeo. And when he shall die, take him and cut him out in little stars, and he will make the face of heaven so fine that all the world will be in love with night and pay no worship to the garish sun. I have bought the mansion of a love, but not possessed it. And though I am sold, not yet enjoyed. So tedious is this day, as is the night before some festival to an impatient child that hath new robes and may not wear them. I haven't said that in such a long time. Oh, I love it so much.
That's beautiful. It's a beautiful speech.
It's a very nice speech.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Shakespeare, as always.
Thank you, Mr. Shakespeare.
Yes. He's got a few very good ones out there, I have to say.
Got a few hits.
Yeah, very good ones. Very, very good. Yeah, Lucy, that was fantastic. There was a really, really lovely reading.
Thank you.
No, brilliant. Thank you so much for today. This has been...
You are so welcome. Thank you for the lovely chat.
No, it's been great. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences. Yeah, again, so many more questions, but we'll leave that for today. We'll do a recap in the future, guys, so stay tuned to that. If you just hang on, I'll finish the recording. We'll have a little debrief afterwards. But for now, all I can say is, guys, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. This has been the Uncensored Critic podcast, and I will be back very, very soon. And yes, wow, brilliant stuff. Lucy Eaton, thank you so much.